What is important for differentiation in the AI world? Is it the distribution advantage, or can you make a model that is so much better than everyone else that it actually changes the paradigm of the tech ecosystem today? And Apple, I think, is rightly betting that their distribution advantage, it can lock in the next generation of technology and really give them an advantage for the next 10, 15 years. They might be right, and honestly, it scares me a little bit. First and foremost, Apple Intelligence. This was the big hurrah at WWDC this year. You know, Apple has been for quite some time being seen on the back foot and behind in the AI arms race. I think that is not without reason. They haven't really been talking about their AI projects overall, but they kind of hit with a major splash this year. It's kind of a ton. So let's see how this goes. So first of all, they announced what they're calling personal intelligence for the iPhone, iPad, and Mac. It's integrated at the iOS level. It uses Apple's own LLM, and it stretches across a number of features and app contexts. So they have tools for writing, they have tools for image generation, which they limit strangely to 3 styles: sketch, illustration, and animated style. And they also have the capacity to take actions within apps and across the iOS. And so this is pretty interesting, right? Because basically they're just opening up all the different features and functionalities with hooks to say, hey, Apple Intelligence can hook in here. And then over time, they're opening it up to developers as well to say basically developers can build features that the AI can reach down into and make things happen for you. The model is going to be executed on the device with a system they're calling semantic index. We won't get into that now. It's fairly complicated. There's some articles you can dig into if you're curious. But what's interesting here is that they have the model. This is going to only be running on more advanced computers and iPhones because the model is actually operating on your computer. And then in the context where it's a more complicated query, they offload the compute to Apple's new proprietary private cloud compute. So basically, they build databases which will do the computation if it's too heavy to be on your device. They're touting it as a privacy framework that only Apple can do, which, I mean, there is some truth to that, I think. It's coming out with iOS 18. You're going to need an iPhone 15 Pro or a Mac or iPad, and the beta is this summer, which is pretty soon. What do you think, Warren? That's quite a lot.
Yeah, super interesting. And I know there's a lot of takes out there on this. One thing that stood out that a few people have commented on is you can tell Apple is playing catch up here a bit in the AI space, because this is one of the only times that Apple has done big product announcements where it's not like, and you can order it now and it ships today. So part of this is for consumers, but also part of this is, I think, for their investor base to be like, don't worry, we're shipping AI stuff. And it is very convenient that like you will need to upgrade your iPhone in order to process things for their AI services. It seems a little counterintuitive, though, that they're saying they are doing this cloud processing, but you still can't access it unless you have the upgraded device. So that's all to say, I think this is bullish for the upgrade cycle for iPhones. I mean, I think you can only leverage 10 years or so of, and this year it's got the best camera ever with the most megapixels. So Apple is overdue, I think, for a meaningful product differentiation on the SKU, and this lines up nicely with this. I don't know. I think this is going to be a lot of people's first practical use for AI in their lives. I mean, those of us that work in the tech space, that follow these things closely, that are the early adopters, we've been playing around with these things for a while. But I think next year might be the year that you start seeing your grandma and your aunt having their first AI experiences. And I think that's going to be an interesting chapter for us. But it's because Apple's going to bring the most user-friendly approach for AI of any offerings on the market so far. So that's kind of where my head's at. Xander, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. My understanding from some of the analysts I follow is that the RAM constraint on a phone is actually real in terms of the capacity to execute these models on device. And so my understanding is like the 8 RAM minimum is a reasonable cutoff, because like your phone also has a bunch of operating systems and other things running in the background. And even though this is supposed to be one of the most compressed and lightweight models, while it does seem kind of arbitrary, my understanding is that it's maybe not. And I don't know. Yeah. One thing I will say is, to the point you're making, like I have not felt a need to upgrade. I will probably upgrade when this rolls out, just because I'm super, super curious and obviously somewhat of an early adopter. And finally, I think the point you made about this being a mass consumer product, it really is the differentiation that Apple has, right? Apple has the capacity to roll out features, even if they're not the most advanced or sophisticated, to huge audiences. And it really kind of raises a question, which is, what is important for differentiation in the AI world? Is it the distribution advantage, or can you make a model that is so much better than everyone else that it forces adoption and actually changes the paradigm of the tech ecosystem today? And Apple, I think, is rightly betting that their distribution advantage can lock in the next generation of technology and really give them an advantage for the next 10, 15 years. And they might be right. And honestly, it scares me a little bit. Apple has announced a number of developer tools that are AI focused. They have an image playground feature, the writing tools, and their app intents functionality, which is all ready to go out the bat. Developers can integrate these into their apps. However, notably, they had a list of the types of developers who could integrate these tools, and gaming was absent from that list when they showed it on screen in the presentation. So I don't really understand the implication of that, but it's interesting to note that the AI hooks that they're talking about aren't going to be available for game products at the launch. Now, I'm sure they eventually will roll out, but it's just an interesting thing to know, especially for the Games Growth podcast.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I can think of any number of factors behind that. I mean, the sentiment for AI in general amongst core gamers is generally very negative right now. There's also implications to cheating in any kind of competitive game, depending on the AI hooks that you make available in gaming. So I think the majority of apps on the App Store are games. So it's inevitable that these hooks will open up to games, but I'm not surprised to see them kind of dipping their toe in the water before they open it up to gaming.
And game developers are famously cutting edge with their capacity to abuse technology. And so I'm sure part of it is just like, let's give other people the chance first and see how it goes. But it's an interesting perspective.
I know we want to dig into a few topics related to this. So maybe let's touch on each of those and then we can come back with some overall thoughts.
Yeah, sounds good. So number one, Siri. You remember Siri, the thing you use to set timers?
Yeah, I think I used Siri in like 2016 or so.
Yeah, I use it for every time I need to cook. I ask it to set timers, and that's what Siri is to me. But they're doing a very, very major update to Siri. Predominantly, it's going to have a large language model underneath it, so it'll understand semantic conversation the way that you expect like ChatGPT or these other language models do. It can infer meaning, which is obviously very useful. So if you say, where did I park my truck? It'll understand that you're asking about your car, something like that, And then also it has a memory, so you can ask it multiple things in context and it'll have a memory of what you've said before. And then also it has the on-screen context. So if you're like, where's my friend live? And you're looking at a text with your friend, it'll figure out, oh, you mean this friend that's in front of you. Also, you can type to Siri now, which is the feature that I never really thought I needed. But, given the way that I interact with ChatGPT, which is almost all by typing, it seems like why not? And then it has an upgraded capacity to interact with apps via a new API they're calling the App Intents API. This framework allows developers to define a set of actions for Siri shortcuts and other OS level experiences. And while there are a ton of examples of what this is going to be yet, it seems really awesome and interesting. Like, so an obvious example of this would be like, you could order an Uber. Uber can make it so that you could order an Uber via the Intents API and exposing that Intents API to Apple's AI, which is allow you to say, hey, order me an Uber, and then it'll order an Uber for you. And finally, it has the personal context of all the data on your phone. This is the really key, hugely differentiated advantage that Apple has over everybody else, which is they have your texts, they have your emails, they know where you live, they know where you've left your car because you have your Apple tracker device in your car. So this is the thing that's going to be differentiated, is it has the whole context of your entire life. So any thoughts on Siri and how you're going to use it now, Warren?
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, Siri has been, I feel like, stuck in time or evolving very slowly. Someone called out that Siri shipped 13 years ago, I believe, which is wild. So in some ways it was like ahead of its time then, but it seems like so behind where modern AI is kind of like a proto AI product.
Right.
So the events of the last year or two in the AI space have made them forced a series of catch-up efforts on Siri. I do really like the idea of Siri being this like overarching agent that interacts with multiple apps rather than just this separate voice on your phone. I think that probably should have been done years ago rather than the experience you have right now, which is like every app has its own separate voice agent or voice chat functionality. And I like the idea that you can now build Siri app and Siri hooks directly into your app. I think that's awesome. But again, should have shipped like 8 years ago. What are the other big announcements related to this?
There's new writing features. So you'll be able to use generative AI to rewrite your texts and your emails. There's also a new image playground, which is very similar to a product like DALL-E, which allows you to go and generate images of your friends or your pictures. Basically the same way that you use DALL-E to generate images, you can do that now in a very specific and like windowed environment, very, very curated, because Apple is scared they're gonna make swastikas or something like that, which is, I think, a very reasonable concern, especially at their scale. The other thing they're doing is like, they call them, emojis or something. They have like custom emojis that you can make using AI, which it's fine. We know why not. It's fun. I mean, I'm sure we'll all use it.
Party trick.
But it's not hugely important to me. That's all like table stakes. So if you use a product like HubSpot or even Google products, like they have these AI rewriting features for a while, right? That's basically It's useful. I use it occasionally, but that's not crazy differentiation. The image generation, it'll be nice to have it embedded. I imagine it'll be fairly limited, not hugely differentiated. Why not? If it's a click away, maybe you use it when you wouldn't before. The thing that's also really interesting is the way that they have decided to go about integrating with other major AI providers. So they've announced the first integration with ChatGPT. And the way that it works is if Apple's native model decides that this is too complicated of a request, it'll basically say, hey, this is too complicated of a request. We want to pass this to ChatGPT. Is that okay with you? They're asking you every time you want to validate it, at least at first. Presumably, you're going to have the ability to override that, hopefully, because otherwise that's going to be a horrible user experience. But who knows? It'll then pass it to ChatGPT, and then GPT will pass back an answer. Now, if you listen to this podcast, I use ChatGPT all the freaking time. So this is really, really awesome, I think, overall. I think it is the market leader by far. And I'm very curious. If this is a seamless experience, I think that's really, really great. The thing is, they're really intelligently becoming the aggregator, right? And so they basically are the front end for all the interfaces with all the other AI models. They said explicitly they will later on integrate with other AIs as well, which means in the same way that they control the distribution for the App Store today, they will control distribution for AIs in the future, which is a scary place to be because you know how abusive they are with their ecosystem. So interesting, exciting, but also like kind of scary. Warren, what do you think?
Well, this reminds me of like in the 90s, it's like, okay, everyone's getting online, starting to use the web, but you set your default search engine. And then there's these backroom deals to have like certain search engines surfaced over the others as a default or as like a more forceful recommendation. And you buy a new Windows PC and everything's trying to be Windows Explorer or whatever. What did it rebrand to? Like at Windows Edge. Yeah. You have to like change all your settings. I think there's going to be the same kind of thing now that we're seeing with LLMs, which is really fascinating and kind of rhymes with this idea that LLMs are replacing search engines in a lot of the functionality that we use search engines for. So I imagine probably a large amount of cash changed hands and will be changing hands in these integrations to be like just being the default LLM. So say that we're in a future where there's like 6 major LLMs and you can choose which one powers your iOS device. How valuable is it to be the one that is the default setting that for, over half the population that doesn't even know or care what an LLM is, they're never going to change that. The same way that like, everyone's grandma still has like Windows Edge as their browser because they don't know that there's other options or a setting to change. So that's where my head goes is I think this is going to be a huge negotiation piece in the future. And we'll probably see that there's a bit of a bidding war and a lot of politics behind what is the default LLM, in this case, powering Apple devices. But I think we'll see versions of this across the tech space.
And there's a lot of really interesting stuff here. So like on the Android side, they'll have it really vertically integrated, right? Similar to how the Android operating system and the Android App Store are all one on the Android side. They have their own
Gemini.
Google has their own Gemini model, and it'll all be vertically integrated. That makes sense. Now the question is, who is paying who for the OpenAI relationship between Apple? Up until this, I had assumed that Apple was behind and they were going to be licensing OpenAI's model to be the brains of their operation. They're very, very strategic and smart, and that they did not do that. And they're basically commodifying ChatGPT. So the question is that everyone understands there's mutual benefit right now to have this integration. And so no money changing hands, and maybe that'll change in the future. It seems crazy that OpenAI would pay for this. And the reason for that is they lose money on every query. They make money from a subscription. You're not getting any subscriptions from the queries. So it's actually a cost center for ChatGPT. So my guess is it might just be a one-to-one, like there's no money changing hands at this point. But that being said, they've made it very clear that bidding is open, right? It's like, who wants it? This is now a new business lever we have because we control demand.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating.
As a counterpoint to that, actually, so they did say in the announcements that for anyone who has a premium version of ChatGPT, additional functionality is unlocked and you get to leverage that full power. So I would argue that in the same way that ChatGPT is and OpenAI will generate revenue by people first trying the product and subscribing to premium, to all of a sudden have install base of millions and millions of new users trying it for the first time is a huge revenue opportunity. But yeah, to your point, there's going to be a loss leading period while all of these people are trying it for the first time and making those queries that are costing them money. I could see the money still changing hands either way in this scenario.
Yeah, it's unclear to me because if the whole point is you're disaggregating from the ChatGPT experience. You might not even know. You just click yes, or even you have no idea what's happening in the back end. And so we'll see. I actually have no idea, but my guess is there's no money changing hands, but I do not know. The punchline here is that the models aren't particularly overwhelming from a technological perspective compared to the models that are out there on the market today. Apple is not cutting edge in this regard. But what's incredible is like the context. Apple has the position of understanding who you are, understanding where you are, understanding who you talk to, and having system level access to all that data in a way that's really differentiated from basically any other product in the market. And the other thing is they have is an immense amount of consumer trust. And so if like I can't stand Apple a lot of times, I will give them this access, right? Because I just understand the amount of value that they're likely to be able to provide to me with this access. And so what's really interesting to me here is the differentiation between who is doing the cutting edge science and who is going to win the market. And it's not obvious that Apple's going to win the market, but based on this and these announcements at WWDC, I'm very, very bullish on their position overall. Actually, I haven't pulled up the stock, but I'm very curious to see what the market thinks as well.
The market likes it. To your point, and in theme with a lot of moves we see with Apple.
The market really likes it.
Yeah. So Apple stock is way up following these announcements. I'm sure everyone most people are aware of that. What do we see Apple's strategy here at the end of the day? We don't see that they are leading on bleeding edge technology. We see that they are bringing a more trusted experience, a more accessible experience, and above all else, they are being a gatekeeper.
Yep.
And this is like Apple's playbook to a T, playing to their strengths, playing to how they've fully owned other segments. And this is going to be a big one to watch over the coming years.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone, for joining the show today. As always, it's brought to you by a team here at Uptick. As you may know, here at Uptick, we do all stuff to help games grow. If you're scaling a great game, we'd love to see how we can help you achieve that goal profitably and sustainably. Reach us on our website. It's uptick.com. That's UPPTIC.com.
Talk soon.